The phone vibrated for the 10th time that morning, and young Demi sighed deeply when she saw her mother's name flashing on the screen. Sitting in her office on the 35th floor of a skyscraper in Gangnam, Seoul, she slid her finger to reject the call, knowing exactly what the conversation was about. Her arranged marriage to Park Miho, the arrogant heir to Park Industries. "Miss Young, your lunch is here," announced her assistant Min Seo over the intercom. "Send him in," replied Demi, unconsciously straightening his navy blazer as he tried to pull himself together. The door opened and Kim Tae-jun walked in carrying the familiar delivery bag. As always, his kind smile brightened up the room, contrasting with the simple uniform of the delivery company. Demi couldn't help but notice how, even in such basic clothes, he maintained an elegant posture that seemed out of place for a delivery man. "Your usual bibimbap, Miss Young," he said, placing the package on the glass table. Their eyes met briefly, and Demi felt that familiar sense of comfort that his presence always brought. The phone vibrated again. This time, it was a text message from Park Miho himself. "Dinner with our families tonight at 8 p.m. Don't be late." Something inside her broke. 3 months of constant pressure, of her family manipulating every aspect of her life, of Park Miho acting as if he already owned her. In a moment of complete impulsiveness, the words escaped her lips. "Marry me." Tae-jun, who was about to leave, stopped abruptly. "Bao-do." "Marry me," Demi repeated, now more firmly, getting up from his chair. "I need to get married soon, and I'd rather marry someone as kind as you 1,000 times than the man they've chosen for me." The silence that followed seemed interminable. Tae-jun studied her with an intensity she had never seen before, as if trying to decipher a complex puzzle. What Demi didn't know was that, at that moment, Kim Tae-jun was also facing his own dilemma. As CEO of TechVision, one of South Korea's most promising technology companies, he had decided to work undercover as a delivery man in order to better understand the market and the real needs of consumers. In recent months, delivering lunch to young Demi had become the most anticipated part of his day. "Yes," he replied, surprising them both. "Yes." Demi blinked several times in disbelief. "With a few conditions," added Tae-jun, his mind already calculating how he could use this situation to maintain his cover a little longer. "First, we'll keep this a secret for now. Secondly, it will be a temporary arrangement until you sort out your situation with your family." Demi nodded quickly, feeling a mixture of relief and anxiety. "Can we get married later this week? I need to tell my family before dinner tonight." In the adjoining room, Min Seo covered his mouth with his hands, having heard the entire conversation through the barely closed door. As Demi's personal assistant for 3 years, she knew well the torment her boss had been facing from family pressure. The rest of that day unfolded like a whirlwind. Demi and Tae-jun exchanged phone numbers and arranged to meet at the civil registry office in 2 hours. Min Seo, now an accomplice in the plan, helped reorganize Demi's schedule and arrange the necessary documents. Meanwhile, on the other side of town, Park Miho received a call from his father. "The private investigator has discovered something interesting about the Young family," said the Park patriarch. "It seems they're on the verge of bankruptcy. They need this wedding more than we imagined." In his real office, hidden away on the top floor of TechVision, Tae-jun's assistant Lee Juno watched worriedly as his boss hurried off dressed as a delivery man. "Sir, are you sure about this?" he asked, holding up a folder with information about young Demi that he had just received. "Sometimes we need to follow our instincts, June," replied Tae-jun, adjusting his uniform cap. "Besides, this might be just what we needed to understand how people really view our technology on a day-to-day basis." What neither of them knew was that that spur of the moment would trigger a series of events that would change their lives forever. As Demi and Tae-jun headed separately to the registry office, each carried their own secrets and fears. She, the weight of disappointing her family, and the truth about the financial difficulties they were facing. He, his true identity, and the technological empire he ran. The sun was beginning to set over Seoul when they signed the marriage papers, witnessed only by Min Seo and a clerk at the registry office. At that moment, as they exchanged hesitant glances over the official documents, Neither of them imagined that their hearts had already begun a journey far more complex than any agreement of convenience could have predicted. The family dinner at the luxurious Jumsik restaurant in Gangnam turned into a silent battlefield when young Dami made his announcement. Sitting between her parents and in front of the Park family, she maintained a firm posture as she revealed her recent marriage to Kim Tae-jun. "You did what?" The voice of her mother, young Hyerin, trembled slightly as her hands clenched the silk napkin. Dami's father, young Seo-jun, remained silent, but his face visibly hardened. Park Miho, who until then had been wearing a smug smile, let the glass of red wine fall onto the immaculate white tablecloth. "Is this some kind of joke?" "It's not a joke," replied Dami, his voice surprisingly calm. "I got married this afternoon to a man I chose." The silence that followed was interrupted only by the soft sound of ambient music and the clinking of cutlery from the neighboring tables. Park Dong-go, Miho's father, stood up slowly, his calculating gaze fixed on Dami. "Miss Young, you may not be aware, but there are preliminary contracts already signed between our families," he said, his voice low but laden with menace. Meanwhile, in a small apartment in Hongdae, Tae-jun was facing his own crisis. His assistant, Lee Juno, paced nervously around the room, holding a folder full of documents. "Sir, the press is already speculating about your disappearance," Juno informed him, running his hand through his hair in frustration. "And now that you've actually got married, this is more than just a market experiment." Tae-jun, still wearing his delivery boy's uniform, watched the city through the window. "I need to keep this disguise for a while longer, Jun. There's something about the Young Corporation that doesn't fit." "But what about Miss Young? She deserves to know the truth." Juno's question hit Tae-jun like a punch in the gut. Over the past few months, delivering meals for Dami, he had witnessed her kindness to staff, her dedication to her work, and above all, her barely disguised loneliness. Back at the restaurant, the situation was deteriorating rapidly. Park Miho stood up abruptly, knocking over his chair. "Do you have any idea what you've just done?" he shouted. "Your family is on the verge of bankruptcy. This marriage was your only salvation." Dami's eyes went wide. "What are you talking about?" His father finally broke his silence. "Damia, we wanted to protect you from this information, but the situation is serious. The Young Corporation is facing an unprecedented crisis." Dami's world began to spin. As he processed the revelation, his phone vibrated. It was a message from Tae-jun. "Is everything okay? Do you need help?" Those simple words brought a strange comfort in the midst of the chaos. Without responding to the shouts and accusations that now filled the restaurant's private room, Dami got up and left. On the busy sidewalk of Gangnam, she dialed Tae-jun's number with trembling fingers. "Can you meet me?" 20 minutes later, they met in Hongdae Park, under the lights of the Bampo Bridge. Tae-jun was still in his delivery boy's uniform, and Dami was still wearing her formal dinner dress. The incongruity of their appearances perfectly reflected the absurdity of their situation. "My family is bankrupt," she said, as soon as they sat down on a bench by the river, "and I've just thrown away the only chance of saving them." Tae-jun felt his heart squeeze. Every fiber of his being wanted to reveal his true identity at that moment, to say that he had the resources to help her. But years of business experience had taught him that emotional decisions were rarely the best ones. "You're not responsible for your family's financial problems," he replied softly. "And marriage shouldn't be used as a business transaction." Men Seo, who had followed her boss discreetly to ensure her safety, watched the scene from afar. His phone rang. It was Lee Juno, with whom he had exchanged information earlier. "The situation is more complicated than we imagined," said Juno. "Tech Vision is about to launch a product that will revolutionize the market, and the CEO needed to understand the target audience personally. But now we have two people trapped in well-intentioned lies," Mensio added, watching as Tae-jun gently offered Dami his coat when a cold breeze blew in from the river. The following day, the headlines on the main news portals speculated on two apparently unrelated events: the mysterious marriage of the heiress of Young Corporation to a stranger, and the sudden sabbatical of TechVision CEO Kim Tae-jun. In his office at TechVision, Jun was coordinating a team to keep up appearances, while his boss continued in his role as a delivery man. At Yum Corporation, Min Seo was doing the same, protecting Dami from the reporters who were beginning to crowd around the entrance to the building. What nobody realized was that, amidst all the lies and secrets, something real was beginning to blossom. Every message exchanged, every moment shared, built a bridge between two worlds that, although different on the surface, shared the same quest for authenticity. And as night fell over Seoul, both Dami and Taejun realized that they had started something much bigger than a simple agreement of convenience. The question was, how long could their secrets remain hidden before the truth came out? A week after the unexpected wedding, Dami found himself staring at the computer screen in his office, the Yum Corporation's figures more alarming than he had ever imagined. The company's shares had plummeted 15% since the announcement of her marriage to a simple delivery man. As the media insisted on highlighting, Miss Yum, Min Seo hurried into the office. "Your father is here?" Before Dami could reply, Young Seo-jun entered the room, his countenance bearing the weight of sleepless nights. "Daughter, we need to talk about the company's situation. Why didn't you tell me before, Dad?" Dami asked, her voice a mixture of hurt and concern. "To protect you," he replied, sitting down heavily. "But now we need solutions." Park Industries was willing to make a substantial investment after marrying Miho. Meanwhile, at TechVision's headquarters, Taejun maintained his double routine. In the morning, disguised as a delivery man, he continued his strategic deliveries, including the daily lunch for Dami. In the afternoon, in his secret office, he analyzed reports on the Yum Corporation. "Sir," June entered with more documents. "We've discovered something interesting. Park Industries has been buying shares in the Yum Corporation through shell companies. It looks like a hostile takeover attempt." Taejun felt his stomach turn. His marriage to Dami had inadvertently complicated an already delicate situation. "Set up a meeting with our legal team," he ordered. "And keep it absolutely confidential." In the modest apartment that Taejun used as part of his cover, Dami was waiting for him for their first dinner together as a couple. She had decided to cook, an attempt to normalize their peculiar situation. "Sorry if it's not perfect," she said, serving kimchi jjigae. "I don't usually cook much." Taejun tasted the dish, surprised by the flavor. "It's delicious," he complimented sincerely. Noticing how she blushed slightly, the conversation flowed naturally, revealing more about their personalities than either had expected. Dami shared stories from his childhood, and Taejun carefully told edited versions of his experiences, keeping his true identity hidden. "How did you start working as a delivery boy?" asked Dami, genuinely interested. Taejun hesitated for a moment. "I wanted to understand people better," he replied, not exactly lying. "Sometimes we need to see the world from a different perspective." Elsewhere in the city, Park Miho was meeting with private investigators. "I want everything about this Kim Taejun, every detail of his life." The investigator nodded, but looked uncomfortable. "Sir, there's something strange. His records seem very well constructed, as if they were a facade." The next morning, Dami faced his own investigation. Scouring the company's archives, he discovered a series of suspicious transactions that his father had authorized in recent months. "Min Seo," called his assistant, "I need you to trace these transfers. Something's not right." Meanwhile, Taejun made his daily delivery to Dami's office, but this time something was different. Park Miho was there, apparently in an unscheduled meeting. "So this is your husband?" Miho asked dismissively, studying Taejun from head to toe. The moment was tense, with Taejun maintaining his humble posture while feeling Miho's calculating gaze. Dami, realizing the danger of the situation, quickly positioned herself between them. "Yes, this is my husband," she said firmly, taking the bag of food from Taejun's hands and purposely brushing her fingers against his. That simple touch sent an electric current through both of them, a moment of connection that neither had expected. Miho watched the interaction with narrowed eyes, his suspicion growing. After work, Dami decided to visit his mother, Hyerin, who had been reclusive since the wedding announcement. He found her in the garden of the family mansion, tending to her orchids. "Amma," she called softly, "we need to talk." Hyerin continued pruning the flowers, About how you destroyed our family's future? About how you kept the truth from me, Demi retorted. About the debts, about the secret deals with Park. Her mother finally faced her, tears in her eyes. We wanted to give you a better life than we had. Marrying Miho would guarantee that. That night, Taejun received an alarming report from June. Park Industries was about to make a move that could completely destroy Young Corporation. As CEO of Tech Vision, he had the power to intervene, but that would mean revealing his identity. In his apartment, Demi received an anonymous phone call. All is not as it seems, Miss Young. Your husband has more secrets than you realize. The weight of the secrets was becoming unbearable for both of them. While Taejun struggled with the decision to reveal his true identity, Demi faced his own discoveries about the family business. In their hearts, something deeper than an agreement of convenience was beginning to blossom, but the lies and secrets threatened to destroy everything before it could even truly begin. The Tech Vision office was buzzing with rumors about the whereabouts of its mysterious CEO, while Taejun, still in his deliverman disguise, watched from afar. The situation was becoming untenable, especially after the Seoul Economic Journal published a story speculating about a possible hostile merger between Park Industries and Young Corporation. Sir, June whispered, meeting Taejun in a discreet cafe in Hongdae. Park Industries is calling an extraordinary meeting of Young Corporation shareholders for next week. They're planning something big. Taejun rotated the coffee cup between his hands, his mind working quickly. How long before we can finalize the acquisition of the shares through our subsidiaries? 3 days minimum, but Park Miho is investigating your cover. He's hired private investigators. Meanwhile, at the Young Corporation, Demi was discovering disturbing documents on his father's computer, suspicious transfers, contracts with dubious clauses, and the most alarming, a preliminary merger agreement with Park Industries signed months before her marriage proposal to Miho. Mensio, she called out, her voice trembling slightly. I need you to arrange a meeting with Kim Taejun. Tonight, the traditional restaurant in Insadong, with its paper screens and soft traditional music, offered the privacy they needed. Demi arrived first, choosing a discreet table at the back. When Taejun entered, still wearing simple delivery boy's clothes, something in his heart squeezed. I've discovered something about my family, she began, after the waiter had poured the tea. Something that could change everything. Taejun watched as she bit her lower lip, a habit he had noticed appearing whenever she was nervous. You can trust me, he said, reaching across the table to lightly touch her fingers. The touch, though brief, sent an electric current through them both. Demi took some documents out of his briefcase. My father, he planned everything. The marriage to Park Miho wasn't just a family arrangement. It was part of a larger plan to save the company through a forced merger. Elsewhere in the city, Park Miho was receiving the first information about Kim Taejun. Sir, the investigator reported, there are serious inconsistencies in your background, employment records, address. Everything seems to have been created recently. Miho smiled, a cold smile that didn't reach his eyes. Keep digging. I want to know exactly who this man is. Back in the restaurant, Taejun felt the weight of his own lie becoming unbearable. The woman in front of him was sharing her most painful discoveries, confiding in him, while he kept his true identity hidden. Demi, he began, his voice softer than usual. There's something I need to tell you. Just then her cell phone rang. It was her father. Daughter, come home immediately. Your mother, she's collapsed. The Severance Hospital in Sinchon was silent at that time of night. Young Hyun had been admitted with severe high blood pressure, the result of the stress of the last few weeks. Demi found his father in the corridor, looking older and more tired than ever. The company is going bankrupt, he finally confessed. Not just struggling, bankrupt. And now Park Miho? It's going to try a hostile takeover, Demi added. I know, Dad. I found the documents. Taejun, who had insisted on accompanying her to the hospital, watched the scene from afar. His phone vibrated with a message from June. Suspicious movement in Young Corp shares. Park Industries is acting faster than we anticipated. The next morning, Korea's main business newspapers carried headlines about the possible takeover of Young Corporation. Shares plummeted even further, and the company's building was surrounded by reporters. Mencio found Dami in his office before dawn, frantically reviewing documents. "There's something strange about those figures," Dami muttered. "As if someone was secretly buying shares to protect us," added a familiar voice. Taejun was standing in the doorway, but there was something different about his posture. He was no longer wearing his delivery boy's uniform, but an impeccably cut suit. "Who are you really?" asked Dami, his heart pounding as he realized that perhaps he didn't really know the man he had married. The moment of truth had arrived, and with it, the weight of all the decisions that had brought them to this point. The sun was rising over Seoul, painting the sky in shades of pink, while inside that office, secrets were about to come to light, changing the course of their lives forever. The silence in the office was deafening as Dami stared at Taejun, now dressed in a perfectly tailored Armani suit. The transformation was astonishing. His posture, his gaze, even his voice sounded different. "I'm Kim Taejun, CEO of TechVision," he revealed, keeping his eyes locked on hers. "And I've been trying to protect your company for the past few months." Dami felt as if the ground had disappeared beneath her feet. Memories of the last few months flashed through her mind. Every lunch delivery, every shy smile, every moment they'd shared. Everything had been based on a lie. "Why?" was all she managed to say, her voice barely above a whisper. "Initially, it was a project to better understand the market," Taejun explained, taking a step towards her. "But then I met you, and everything changed." Mencio discreetly left the room, meeting Lee Juno in the corridor. Both had been silent accomplices in this farce, and were now witnessing it unfold. "Park Industries is planning a hostile takeover of Young Corporation," continued Taejun, placing a folder on Dami's desk. "But TechVision has been secretly buying shares through subsidiaries to prevent this." At that moment, Park Miho burst through the office door, followed by security guards. His smile was triumphant. "I finally found you, Kim Taejun," he declared, brandishing a tablet with headlines about TechVision's CEO. "Or should I say the fake delivery man?" Dami stood up abruptly, his hands shaking. "Did you know that? Did you know who he was?" "I found out yesterday," replied Miho. "And now everyone will know about the farce you two set up." Taejun remained calm, adjusting his suit. "If you intend to make a scandal, Mr. Park, I suggest you consider the consequences. TechVision has technology that would make Young Corporation a leader in the Asian market." In Severance Hospital, Young Hyerin was being visited by her husband when the news exploded on all the channels. The story of the undercover CEO and his marriage to the heiress of Young Corporation went viral instantly. "Seo Jun," Hyerin called out, watching the headlines on the bedroom TV. "Maybe this isn't as bad as it looks." At TechVision's headquarters, Juno was coordinating a press relations team to control the damage. Both companies' shares were fluctuating wildly on the stock exchange. Back in Dami's office, the tension was palpable. "We need to talk," she said to Taejun, completely ignoring Miho's presence. In private, they headed for the meeting room on the top floor, leaving a furious Park Miho behind. Through the glass windows, the city of Seoul stretched out under a cloudy sky, reflecting the turmoil in their hearts. "All this time," Dami began, "while I was worrying about your reaction to my social position, you were," his voice faltered, "someone trying to find authenticity in a world of appearances," Taejun added. "Every moment we spent together, every conversation was real, only the context was different." In the lobby of the building, reporters began to gather. Mencio and Juno worked together to control access, while on social media hashtags about the CEO deliverer and corporate wedding became trending topics. A merger between TechVision and Young Corporation could save both companies from Park Industries' influence, suggested Taejun, cautiously approaching Dami. "But that decision needs to be yours. How can I trust you now?" she asked, unshed tears glistening in her eyes. "Because despite the lies about my identity, I've never lied about how I feel about you," he replied, his voice charged with emotion. "This marriage may have started as an agreement, but it has become so much more." On the first floor, Park Miho was making explosive statements to the press. "It's all a corporate conspiracy. They planned this from the start. But his words were interrupted when young Seo-jun arrived at the building, accompanied by lawyers from the Young Corporation. "Miho," he called out authoritatively, "I suggest you stop now, before certain information about Park Industries comes to light." In the meeting room, Dami and Taejun remained silent, the weight of their revelations hanging between them. Through the window, they could see the first drops of rain beginning to fall on Seoul. "I need time," Dami finally said, "to process all this." Taejun nodded, respecting his space. "I understand, but I want you to know that, regardless of our business situation, my feelings for you are true." As he left the room, Dami stopped at the door. "You know what's ironic?" she said, without turning around. "I was starting to fall in love with the delivery man too." The rain was now falling hard on the city, washing away the streets and creating a translucent veil between the present and the uncertain future that awaited them. The masks had fallen, but the true feelings that were born behind them remained, waiting to see if they would survive the light of truth. The storm raging over Seoul seemed to mirror the emotional maelstrom taking hold of Dami's heart as she drove aimlessly through the city's wet streets. Taejun's words echoed in her mind, mingling with memories of the past few months. Every smile, every small gesture of kindness now had a new meaning. Min Seo, sitting in the passenger seat, remained respectfully silent. After years of working together, she knew when her boss needed space to process her thoughts. "Did you know?" asked Dami suddenly, stopping the car in front of the Han River. "I found out a little while ago," admitted Min Seo, "through Lee Juno, but it wasn't my secret to tell." In his office at Tech Vision, Taejun stared out at the city through the panoramic windows, his reflection in the glass showing no longer the humble delivery boy, but the powerful CEO he had always been. June rushed in with new reports. Young Corporation's shares have stabilized following the announcement of a possible merger with Tech Vision, he reported. But Park Miho is calling a press conference for this afternoon. "Cancel my appointments," ordered Taejun. "I need to take care of this myself." At the Young Mansion, Hyerin had been discharged from hospital and was now discussing the latest developments with her husband. "A CEO disguised as a delivery man," she muttered, pouring tea. "Sounds like a drama script." "One who can save our company," replied Seo-jun, studying documents about Tech Vision. Kim Taejun built a tech empire from scratch in less than 10 years. On the other side of town, in a discreet cafe in Hongdae, Dami was meeting her best friend, Shin Yina, an investigative journalist. "I need you to find out everything about Tech Vision," Dami asked. "I can't just rely on what's on the surface." "I've already started investigating," Yina replied, sliding a folder across the table. "And I found something interesting about Kim Taejun's past." Yina's findings revealed a pattern. Before every major Tech Vision launch, Taejun used to work undercover in different sectors of the market. It was his way of truly understanding consumer needs. In Park Miho's office, the atmosphere was tense. His advisors were coming up with strategies to discredit both Taejun and the Young Corporation. "No matter what they do," declared Miho, "I will not allow this merger to happen." The afternoon brought an unexpected twist. During the press conference called by Miho, Taejun appeared without warning, causing a stir among the journalists present. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his presence commanding immediate attention. "I've come to clarify a few points. Yes, I worked undercover as a delivery boy. Yes, I married young Dami. But no, it wasn't a corporate conspiracy." Dami, who was watching the live broadcast on his cell phone, felt his heart race as he watched Taejun continue. "I met an extraordinary woman who, like me, was trapped by the expectations of others. Our marriage began as an agreement, but it turned into something real. As for the merger between our companies, it will be decided transparently, with full respect for shareholders and employees." In his apartment in Gangnam, Dami received an unexpected visit from his mother. "When your father started out," said Hyerin, taking a seat next to her daughter, "he too was just an ambitious young man with big dreams, just like Kim Taejun. The difference is that Dad never lied about who he was," Dami replied. "No," agreed her mother, "but he also never had the courage to defy convention like you did." Dami's phone vibrated with a message from Taejun. "Can we talk? I'm at our place." Our place was the small restaurant in Insadong where they had dined together for the first time. When Dami arrived, he found Taejun not in his business suit or deliverman's uniform, but in casual clothes. "No disguises this time," he said, getting up to pull out a chair for her. "Why did you carry on with the deliveries even after we got married?" asked Dami, getting straight to the point. "Because those moments with you were real," he replied. "The only time of day when I could just be myself, without the weight of expectations that come with being CEO." Meanwhile, at Young Corporation's headquarters, Lee Juno was presenting the directors with a detailed merger proposal that would benefit both companies. TechVision's technology combined with Young Corporation's infrastructure would create something revolutionary, he explained. Back at the restaurant, Dami and Taejun faced their truths. "I can't promise it will be easy," he said, "but I can promise to be completely honest from now on, and I can't promise that I'll trust right away," Dami replied. "But I'm willing to try to understand." Night fell over Seoul, and with it came the promise of a new beginning. As Dami and Taejun walked side by side through the streets of Insadong, their shadows mingled under the lights of traditional lanterns, symbolizing two worlds that, despite the differences and lies of the past, were finding a way to come together. The truth had been revealed, but the real challenge had only just begun, building trust on the ruins of broken secrets, and turning an agreement of convenience into a genuine love story. A week after the press conference, TechVision's headquarters was buzzing with speculation about the possible merger with Young Corporation. Taejun, now publicly recognized as CEO, watched through the windows of his executive office as a row of luxury cars parked in front of the building. "The Young Corporation representatives have arrived for the meeting," announced Juno, nervously adjusting his tie. "Young Seojun is personally present." Taejun nodded, his thoughts wandering to Dami. Since their last conversation at the restaurant in Insadong, they had kept in touch mainly through cautious messages and brief calls. The invisible wall of mistrust still hung between them. At the same time, in a cafe in Gangnam, Dami was meeting Shin Yuna, who had found out more about Taejun's past. "He grew up in Busan," Yuna explained, sliding old photographs across the table. "Father died when he was a teenager, mother a teacher. He built TechVision from scratch, starting in a garage with two friends from university." Dami studied one particular photo, a young Taejun working as a waiter in a university restaurant. "He always worked undercover to understand different perspectives," he murmured, beginning to better understand his motivations. In the TechVision meeting room, the tension was palpable. Young Seojun presented detailed financial data for the company, while lawyers from both sides discussed terms and conditions. "The merger needs to benefit both companies equally," declared Taejun, his voice firm. "I'm not interested in a hostile takeover or in destroying the legacy of the Young family." Seojun watched the young CEO with renewed interest. "You really care about my daughter, don't you?" Before Taejun could reply, the doors to the room opened abruptly. Park Miho entered, followed by his father and a team of lawyers. "This merger is illegal," Miho announced, throwing a folder on the table. "We have evidence of irregularities in the preliminary negotiations." At Severance Hospital, Hyerin was undergoing follow-up examinations when she received an urgent call from Min Seo. "Ms. Yeon, I think you should see this," her assistant said, sending her a news link. The headline was explosive. "Park Industries accuses TechVision of trading fraud." Dami, who had just left the cafe, received the news via multiple notifications on his cell phone. Without thinking twice, he went to TechVision. In the lobby of the building, reporters crowded around, eager for statements. Min Seo and June worked together to control the chaos, while on the executive floor, the meeting had turned into a verbal battlefield. "These accusations are unfounded," Taejun argued, remaining calm. "TechVision's every move has been documented and legal." "Including your arranged marriage?" teased Miho with a mischievous grin. It was at that moment that Dami entered the room, his presence instantly silencing all the voices. "Our marriage may have started out as an arrangement," she said, walking over to stand next to Taejun. "But the accusations against TechVision are clearly a desperate attempt to stop a legitimate merger." Park Dong-go, Miho's father, stood up slowly. Miss Young, your loyalty is admirable, but my loyalty is to the truth, Dami interrupted. And the truth is that while Park Industries was attempting a hostile takeover, TechVision offered a genuine partnership. June discreetly slid a tablet over to Taejun, showing newly discovered information about Park Industries' suspicious transactions. If you want to talk about irregularities, Taejun continued, perhaps we should discuss certain Park Industries operations over the past 6 months. Park Dong-go's face paled visibly. Miho, sensing the change in atmosphere, tried to intervene, but his father silenced him with a gesture. Perhaps, said Patriarch Park slowly, we should reconsider our position on this matter. The meeting ended shortly afterwards, with Park Industries withdrawing its accusations. As the executives left the room, Dami and Taejun remained, the silence between them laden with unspoken words. Why did you come? He finally asked. Because despite everything, I trust the man I met, she replied, her voice soft but firm. Whether he's a delivery boy or a CEO. In the hallway, Mensio smiled at June. They'll be fine, she whispered. How can you be sure? He asked. Because some lies are born out of fear, Mensio replied. But some truths are born out of love. In the evening, in the small apartment that Taejun still kept from his days as a delivery boy, he and Dami sat on the balcony, watching the lights of Seoul. I still have my delivery boy's uniform, he confessed, causing Dami to smile. Keep it, she replied. To remind us where we started. The city continued its frenetic pace below them, indifferent to the transformations taking place in the lives of two people who had found truth in the midst of lies and love in the midst of corporate chaos. News of the dropping of Park Industries' charges against TechVision circulated quickly through Seoul's corporate corridors. As the dust began to settle, Taejun found himself facing a new challenge, balancing his newfound personal life with Dami and the responsibilities of leading two merging companies. The minority shareholders are worried, reported June, handing over a stack of reports during the morning meeting. They fear that the personal aspect of your relationship with Miss Young could influence business decisions. Dami, for his part, was immersed in his own process of discovery. After finding more old photographs of Taejun in her research, she decided to take a surprise trip to Busan, his hometown. The small coastal neighborhood where Taejun grew up remained virtually unchanged. The school where his mother had taught was still there, as was the university restaurant where he had worked to pay for his studies. He was always different from other young people, commented Song Mayan, the restaurant's former owner, serving Dami tea. Even when he was exhausted, he never complained. Always watching, always learning. In Seoul, Taejun had an unexpected visitor in his office. Kim Hae-won, his mother, had arrived unannounced, bringing with her the simplicity and wisdom that had always characterized her. So this is the young woman who made my son abandon his masks? She asked, looking at a photo of Dami on Taejun's desk. Amma, it's not that simple, he replied, feeling like a little boy again under his mother's discerning gaze. True love is never simple, Taejun, she smiled. But it's always honest. Meanwhile, in Busan, Dami was finding out more about her husband's past. In the library of the local university, she found articles about the first technology projects developed by Taejun and his friends. He used to spend whole nights here, recalled the elderly librarian Kim Sunwoo. He said he wanted to change the world, but first he had to understand it. Mensio, who accompanied Dami on his journey of discovery, received constant updates from June on the situation in Seoul. The merger is progressing, he reported over the phone. But there are rumors that Park Miho hasn't given up completely. At the Park mansion, Miho faced his father's disappointment. You underestimated Kim Taejun, Park Dong-go scolded. And you overestimated your own influence. Back in Seoul, Taejun took his mother to see the small apartment where he had lived as a delivery boy. Hae-won touched the simple walls, examined the few pieces of furniture. You've always needed to experience life through different lenses, she observed. But now, you've finally found someone who sees the whole of you. Taejun's phone vibrated with a message from Dami. I met your old math teacher today. She's still holding on to her first science prize. A warm feeling spread through Taejun's chest as he read the message. Dami wasn't just accepting his past. He He was actively seeking to know it. On the train back to Seoul, Dami reflected on everything he had discovered. The stories of a determined young man who worked tirelessly for his dreams, but never lost the ability to connect with people from all walks of life. He didn't just use disguises for market research, she concluded to Min Seo. It was his way of keeping in touch with reality. When Dami arrived at her apartment in Seoul, she found a surprise waiting. An old box full of notebooks, sketches and projects from the early days of TechVision. "I thought you might like to know this part of my story too," said Taejun's note. At Young Corporation's headquarters, Young Seo-jun was analyzing the latest merger reports when his wife, Hyerin, entered the office. "Our daughter is on a journey of discovery," she commented, taking a seat next to her husband. "Maybe we should do the same." "What do you mean?" he asked, puzzled. "To really get to know Kim Taejun, not just as a CEO but as a person." That evening, Dami and Taejun met on the terrace of TechVision. The city glowed below them, a carpet of lights stretching to the horizon. "Your old teacher told me about the boy who dreamed of creating technology that would bring people together," said Dami, his voice soft in the night. "And now?" he asked, his eyes meeting hers. "Now I understand that you never stopped being that boy," she replied, entwining her fingers in his. "You just found different ways to fulfill your dream." The soft evening wind carried promises of a future where masks would no longer be necessary, where the truth, though complex, would be enough. The merger of the companies continued its course, but the Real Union took place there. In the understanding silence between two people who were finally beginning to see each other fully, the city continued its incessant rhythm below them, a silent witness to a story that had begun in disguise, but was now blossoming into the purest truth. The official announcement of the merger between TechVision and Young Corporation was on the front pages of the business newspapers when Dami found an old photograph in one of Taejun's notebooks. The image showed a smiling teenager standing next to a delivery bike, his first job in Busan. "Some things never change," she murmured, gently touching the photograph as she prepared for another day at the company that was now undergoing profound changes. At TechVision, Taejun was facing a particularly challenging morning. A group of international investors had arrived from Tokyo for a series of meetings about the merger, and among them was Yamamoto Kenji, known for his skepticism about emotionally motivated mergers. "Kim-san," began Yamamoto during the first meeting, "how can we be sure that your marriage to Miss Yum won't compromise important decisions?" Before Taejun could answer, the door to the meeting room opened and Dami entered, carrying a detailed presentation on the merger's financial projections. "Perhaps I can answer that question," she said, her presence commanding immediate respect. "Our personal relationship allows us to deeply understand the needs and potential of both companies." In his office, Young Seo-jun received an unexpected visit from Park Miho. "I've come to make one last offer," said Miho, placing a folder on the table. "We can still reverse this merger." Seo-jun opened the folder slowly, studying its contents before replying. "You know, Miho, I spent years thinking I knew what was best for my daughter and for this company. I was wrong on both counts." In TechVision's development department, June was coordinating a mixed team of employees from both companies on a new project. Min Seo, who was now actively participating in the integration between the companies, watched with interest as the different corporate cultures began to blend. "It's like seeing two families become one," she commented to June during a break. "With all the complications that entails," he replied, smiling as he watched a group of developers excitedly discussing a new technology. In a cafe near the office, Dami was meeting her mother, Hyerin, who seemed more serene after her recovery. "I found this in your father's old things," said Hyerin, handing her daughter a yellowed envelope. Inside was an old postcard from Busan, with a message written by Taejun as a teenager, thanking her for an internship opportunity at Young Corporation. "Fate has curious ways of working," reflected Hyerin, observing the surprise on her daughter's face. Back at TechVision, Taejun was leading the Japanese investors on a tour of the facilities when his phone buzzed with a message from Dami. "We need to talk about a postcard from 15 years ago." On the roof of the building where they had shared so many important moments, Dami showed Taejun the postcard. Why didn't you ever mention that you used to work at the Young Corporation? Because it was only for 2 weeks, he replied, touching the aged paper. But it was 2 weeks that changed my life. Seeing your father lead that company inspired me to build something of my own. On the other side of town, Park Miho was facing his own epiphany in a frank conversation with his father. Sometimes losing is necessary in order to grow, said Park Dong-go, surprising his son with his belated wisdom. Watch how Kim Tae-jun has turned every defeat into learning. The afternoon brought a surprise when Kim Hae-won, Tae-jun's mother, showed up at Young Corporation for tea with Hyerin. The two women, so different in their backgrounds, discovered an unexpected connection in their experiences as mothers. Our children have taught us more than we ever thought possible, commented Hae-won, sharing stories about young Tae-jun. Meanwhile, in the development room, an important discovery was being made. The combination of the two companies' technologies had resulted in an innovation that no one had expected. It's as if the companies were destined to come together, commented a developer, eliciting knowing smiles from June and Mensio. At the end of the day, as the city prepared for the evening, Dami and Tae-jun walked through the park, where they had met so many times during their delivery boy days. You know what's funny? Said Dami, stopping to watch the sunset. When I proposed that crazy wedding, I thought I was running away from fate. Actually, I was running towards it. Tae-jun took her hand, entwining his fingers in hers. Sometimes the best stories start with a lie that turns into truth. The soft night wind carried promises of a future where past and present intertwined perfectly, like the destinies that had brought them there. The merger of the companies was just a reflection of the deeper union that had formed between two souls who had met in the most unexpected way possible. The news of the technological breakthrough resulting from the merger between TechVision and Young Corporation circulated through Seoul's corporate corridors like a gale. An innovation that promised to revolutionize the way people connected, ironically born from the union of two companies whose leaders had connected in the most unlikely way. Tae-jun was watching the city from his office at TechVision when June rushed in with a tablet in her hands. Sir, Park Industries is making suspicious moves in the market. It looks like they're trying to buy shares in the newly merged company through foreign subsidiaries. In his own office at Young Corporation, Dami received an unexpected visit from Shin Yuna, his journalist friend. I found something you need to see, said Yuna, placing a folder on the table. It's about Park Miho's past. The documents revealed a series of shady deals conducted by Miho in Hong Kong, including previous attempts at hostile takeovers that had resulted in undercover scandals. Why are you showing me this now? Asked Dami, leafing through the papers with growing concern. Because he's about to make a public presentation alleging irregularities in the merger, replied Yuna. And this time, he has the backing of international investors. Meanwhile, in a traditional restaurant in Bukchan-Hanok village, Kim Hae-won and Young Hyerin were sharing another cup of tea, their friendship blossoming unexpectedly. You know, began Hae-won, pouring more green tea. When Tae-jun was a child, he always said that he wanted to build bridges between people. I never imagined that he would do that so literally. Hyerin smiled, remembering how her own daughter had always shown a similar determination. Sometimes our children surprise us by fulfilling dreams we didn't even know they had. At TechVision, Mensio and Juno were coordinating a communications team to deal with the growing rumors about Park Industries' possible interference. The mood among employees was one of apprehension mixed with excitement at the recent technological breakthrough. It's amazing how everything connects, commented Mensio, observing the teams working together. As if every moment, every decision led us here. The afternoon brought an emergency meeting at Tae-jun's office. Executives from the two companies, now united, discussed strategies to protect the merger and the new technology. What Miho doesn't understand, said Tae-jun, his voice carrying a mixture of frustration and determination, is that this merger goes far beyond numbers and the market. It's about people, connections, the future. Dami, sitting next to him, added, and maybe that's exactly what scares you, the idea that success doesn't have to mean destroying others. After the meeting, they walked together to the small apartment Tae-jun kept from his days as a delivery boy. The place had become a refuge, a constant reminder of how it all began. "Remember the first day I delivered your lunch?" asked Taejun, preparing 2 instant ramens just like old times. "You smiled in a different way," replied Dami, helping to cut the vegetables. "As if you knew something I didn't." "Actually, I was nervous. It was the first time I delivered in person to someone I knew from corporate lives." The moment was interrupted by a call from June. Park Miho had scheduled a press conference for the following morning. In his office at Park Industries, Miho stared out at the night city, his determination fueled by years of competition and resentment. His father, Park Dong-do, quietly entered the room. "Son," he began, his voice carrying an unusual weight. "Not every battle needs to be won to prove our worth." But Miho had already made up his mind. The charges were ready, the investors lined up, the plan in motion. The next morning, as Seoul awoke under a heavy sky, Dami and Taejun prepared to face perhaps their greatest challenge. Not just as CEO and heiress, but as partners who had found something true in the midst of so many masks and pretenses. "No matter what happens today," said Taejun, adjusting Dami's tie in a gesture of intimacy that had become natural, "we've built something real here. Something that neither Miho nor anyone else can destroy." Dami touched his face gently. "You know, it's funny. When I proposed that crazy wedding, I was running away from a life that others had planned for me. I ended up finding exactly the life I'd always wanted." As they made their way to the press conference venue, Min Seo and Juno coordinated the last details of the communication strategy. The evidence Yuna had collected about Miho's activities in Hong Kong was ready to be revealed if necessary. The city seemed to be holding its breath, waiting to see how this story, which had begun with the simple marriage proposal to a fake delivery man, would reach its next chapter. In the lobby of the hotel where the press conference was to take place, Young Seo-jun met his daughter. "Damia," he said, his voice breaking, "I want you to know how proud I am, not just for what you've built professionally, but for having the courage to follow your heart." The moment had arrived. The cameras were in place, the journalists ready, Seoul's corporate world awaiting the next move in this game of power and love that had captured everyone's imagination. The conference room at the Shilla Hotel was packed when Park Miho took to the stage, his confident smile masking the tension evident in his eyes. Cameras snapped incessantly as journalists from all over the country flocked to what promised to be one of the biggest corporate stories of the year. "Ladies and gentlemen," began Miho, his voice echoing through the microphones, "today I am here to expose a series of irregularities in the merger between TechVision and Yoon Corporation." In the back rows, Dami and Taejun watched side by side, their hands discreetly intertwined under the table. Men Seo and Juno occupied strategic positions in the room, ready to implement the plan they had meticulously prepared overnight. "The merger we witnessed," continued Miho, projecting graphics onto the screen behind him, "was built on a foundation of lies and manipulations, starting with TechVision's own CEO, who disguised himself as a delivery man to genuinely understand the needs of the market," interrupted a strong voice. All eyes turned to the entrance of the room, where Kim Haewon, Taejun's mother, was walking with dignity towards the stage. "As an educator for over 30 years," she continued, her presence commanding immediate respect, "I taught my son that true knowledge comes from direct experience. What you call manipulation, Mr. Park, others call dedication and humility." Miho hesitated momentarily, his carefully prepared script being challenged from an angle he hadn't anticipated. Taking advantage of the gap, Shin Yina stood up between the journalists. "Mr. Park, could you comment on your activities in Hong Kong during the period from 2019 to 2020? She asked, her professional voice masking the strategic blow she was about to deliver. Miho's face paled visibly. At the back of the room, Park Dong-do stood up abruptly, recognizing the imminent danger to his family and empire. "This press conference is closed," Dong-do announced, trying to control the damage. But it was too late. June discreetly distributed folders to selected journalists containing documents about Park Industries' true business practices. At the same time, Min Seo was coordinating the online dissemination of the groundbreaking technological discoveries resulting from the TechVision Young merger. In the midst of the ensuing chaos, Dami stood up, her posture emanating the strength of generations of female entrepreneurs who came before her. "If I may," her clear voice cut through the hubbub, "I'd like to introduce something." On the screens, images emerged of the new project developed by the merged company, a technology that promised to revolutionize the way people at different social and economic levels connected and did business. "This is the real story we should be telling," she continued. "Not about disguises or suspicions, but about how different perspectives can create something extraordinary when they come together." Taejun joined her, his arm lightly brushing hers in a gesture of silent support. "Our merger wasn't just about business," he added. "It was about breaking down barriers, about seeing beyond appearances." In the audience, Young Seojun and Hyerin looked on with obvious pride. Next to them, Kim Haewon smiled softly, recognizing in his son the same determined spirit that had led him to work in so many different jobs during his youth. Park Miho, realizing that he had lost control of the situation, tried one last card. "What about the investors? How can they trust a company led by someone who has lived a lie?" "Sometimes," replied Taejun, his voice carrying years of experience and learning, "we need to lose ourselves to truly find ourselves. Every delivery I made as a false deliverer taught me more about leadership than any MBA could." The room exploded with questions and flashbulbs, but in the midst of the chaos, Dami and Taejun stood firm, their complementary presences symbolizing the true strength of the fusion they had created. As the journalists gathered to write their stories, turning the story of a scandal into a case of innovation and business transformation, Park Dong-go discreetly approached the couple. "You won," he admitted, his voice carrying a mixture of respect and resignation. "But more than that, you showed me a new way of doing business." The afternoon sun was beginning to lower over Seoul when Dami and Taejun finally left the hotel, exhausted but victorious. In the car, on the way to the small apartment that had become their refuge, Dami leaned his head on Taejun's shoulder. "You know," she murmured, "when I proposed that crazy wedding, I never imagined we'd be here." "Life has an interesting way of surprising us," he replied, gently kissing her forehead. "Especially when we stop trying to control every detail." In his office at Park Industries, Miho stared at the city through the windows, confronting for the first time the possibility that perhaps there was more than one way to build a legacy. Night was falling over Seoul, but at the headquarters of Tech Vision and Young Corporation, the lights remained on, teams working with renewed enthusiasm on the project that promised not only to revolutionize the market, but also to transform lives. The success of the press conference brought a temporary lull, but Taejun knew that the real challenges were just beginning. The next morning, as the press celebrated the innovative technology born of the merger, he found Dami gazing out over the city from Tech Vision's terrace. "We need to talk about the future," she said, without looking away from the Seoul skyline. "Not just the company's but ours." The marriage that had begun as an agreement of convenience had turned into something deeply real, but they both knew they needed to redefine their terms now that all the masks had fallen. In his office at Park Industries, Miho was facing a tense meeting with the board of directors. The revelations about his business dealings in Hong Kong had shaken the confidence of the shareholders, and rumors of his possible replacement were beginning to circulate. "Maybe it's time for a change of perspective," suggested Park Dong-go, surprising everyone with his softness. "Not all victories come from destroying others." At Young Corporation, Men Seo was coordinating the transition of teams while observing an unusual scene. Young Seojun and Kim Haewon talking animatedly about the future technology project. "It's fascinating how our sons have managed to unite not just companies, but people," commented Haewon, her eyes shining with maternal pride. June rushed into the room, carrying important news. International investors were showing growing interest in the new technology, especially after the demonstration of transparency and innovation during the press conference. In a traditional cafe in Insadong, Dami met Shin Yina, who had become more than an ally during the whole situation. "You know what's ironic?" said Yina, stirring his green tea. "This story started with you trying to escape an arranged marriage, and ended up becoming the biggest corporate love story I've ever covered." The afternoon brought a surprise when Park Miho showed up unannounced at Tech Vision, this time alone and visibly different. "I've come to make peace," he declared, his usual arrogance replaced by something close to humility, "and maybe learn something new." Tae-jun, who had faced his own moments of transformation, recognized the sincerity in the gesture. "Sometimes we need to lose something to understand its true value," he replied, offering his former rival a seat. Meanwhile, at the young residence, Hyerin was organizing a family dinner which, for the first time, would include not only the Kim family, but also the Park family. Reconciliation, she believed, had to start with small gestures. "The best success stories," she commented to her assistant as she oversaw the preparations, "are those that turn enemies into allies." In the small apartment that had been the start of everything, Dami found Tae-jun organizing his old delivery boy clothes. "You won't be needing these anymore?" she asked, touching the familiar fabric of his uniform. "I'll keep them," he replied, as a reminder that sometimes we need to lose ourselves to truly find ourselves. Dinner at the Young Mansion was a surprisingly harmonious event. Park Dong-go, unburdened by old rivalries, shared stories of his early days in business. Miho, sitting between Juno and Menseo, showed a genuine interest in the technology project he had tried to destroy. "It's amazing how people can change," Menseo whispered to Juno, observing the transformation. "Sometimes we just need to give them the chance," he replied, his soft gaze meeting hers. After dinner, in the garden lit by traditional lanterns, Dami and Tae-jun found a moment of privacy. "Remember the day you proposed to me?" he asked, a smile playing on his lips. "How could I forget? It was the most impulsive and right decision of my life." "So," continued Tae-jun, kneeling in front of her, "how about we get married again? This time no masks, no secrets, just us." The proposal, although expected, made Dami's heart leap. At the bottom of the garden, their families watched discreetly, smiles of approval on their faces. The night was clear, and the stars shone over Seoul like silent witnesses to a story that had begun with a lie, but had blossomed into something extraordinarily true. The city continued its relentless pace below them, but at that moment, in the garden of the Young Mansion, time seemed to have stopped to celebrate not just the union of two people, but the transformation of everyone who had been touched by their journey. The news of Tae-jun and Dami's second marriage proposal circulated quickly through Seoul's business circles, this time not as a scandal, but as confirmation of a story that had captivated everyone. The Korea Herald newspaper devoted an entire page to the couple, highlighting how their union had transformed not just two companies, but an entire corporate culture. At the headquarters of the newly founded company, now called Taekyung Solutions, June was coordinating preparations for the official launch of the new technology. The teams, once separated by corporate rivalries, now worked in harmony, sharing knowledge and experience. "It's amazing how everything has changed," Menseo commented to June, as they watched developers from the former TechVision and Young Corporation collaborating on a new project. "It seems like yesterday that Dami proposed marriage to a supposed delivery man." In his office, Tae-jun received an unexpected visit from Park Miho, who had undergone a remarkable transformation in recent weeks. "I've come to present a proposal," said Miho, placing a folder on the table. "Park Industries wants to be a partner in the development of the new platform." Miho's proposal reflected a fundamental change in his approach to business. Instead of trying to dominate and control, he now sought collaboration in mutual growth. Meanwhile, at the Kim residence, Haewon was hosting a traditional dinner with Hyerin, the two women planning not only the wedding ceremony, but also discussing how their families could continue the legacy of transformation that their sons had started. "Who would have thought that my son delivering food would find not only love, but a new way of doing business?" reflected Haewon, arranging the flowers in the garden. At a cafe in Gangnam, Dami was meeting Shin Yuna, who had become a close friend after the recent events. "I'm writing a book about this whole story," Yuna revealed. "How two people broke the traditional mold of Korean business." Dami's phone vibrated with a message from Tae-jun. "I need to show you something. Meet me at our place in an hour." Our place now referred to the small apartment where their story had truly begun. When Dami arrived, he found Tae-jun wearing his old deliverman's uniform, a bag of food in his hands. "I thought I'd recreate our first meeting," he explained, "but this time without masks." The simplicity of the gesture touched Dami deeply. As they shared their meal, they talked about how their lives had changed dramatically in such a short time. At Taekyung Solutions, young Seo Jun was conducting a meeting with international investors, presenting not only the impressive figures from the merger, but also the more humane business philosophy that had emerged from it. The true value of a company, he explained, is not just in its profits, but in how it transforms people's lives. Park Dong-go, present at the meeting, nodded in agreement. His own perspective on business had changed significantly after observing how the union between Taejun and Dami had created something greater than simple financial gains. Min Seo and Juno, working late at the office, found themselves growing closer, their own love story quietly blossoming amidst the corporate transformations. Sometimes I think we were all characters in a bigger story, reflected Min Seo, organizing the last details of the tech launch. A story about finding truth in the midst of lies? Teased June, his smile revealing that he too had been transformed by recent events. In the apartment, Dami and Taejun were planning not only their wedding, but the future they wanted to build together. The technology they had developed promised to connect people from different walks of life, breaking down barriers just as they had done. "You know what's funny?" said Dami, leaning on Taejun's shoulder. "When I proposed that crazy wedding, I was trying to escape a fate that others had planned for me. I ended up finding exactly the fate I was looking for. Night was falling over Seoul, and on the city's busy streets, people from all walks of life were using Taekyung Solutions beta app, connecting in ways that had previously seemed impossible." In his office at Park Industries, Miho was finalizing the details of a presentation on business collaboration, his former competitive stance giving way to a more inclusive vision of success. The transformation that had begun with an impulsive marriage proposal had spread like ripples on a pond, touching and transforming lives far beyond Dami and Taejun's immediate circle. The first snow of winter was falling softly over Seoul as guests began to arrive at Bukshin Hanek village for Dami and Taejun's wedding. The traditional site, with its old houses and cobbled streets, had been chosen as a symbol of the union between tradition and modernity that characterized its history. Min Seo, adjusting Dami's hanbok in one of the traditional houses transformed into the bride's parlor, couldn't help but smile as she recalled how it all began with an impulsive marriage proposal to a supposed delivery man. "Are you nervous?" she asked, tidying up the folds of her traditional dress. "Funnily enough, no," Dami replied, looking at her reflection. "This time, I know exactly what I'm getting myself into." In another nearby hanok, Taejun was making the final adjustments to her traditional costume with Jun's help. Park Miho, now an unlikely ally, entered carrying an old box. "I found this in the Park Industries archives," he said, revealing photographs of the first time Taejun had interned at Young Corporation, while still a teenager. "I thought I'd like to have this as a souvenir." In the main area of the villa, transformed into a ceremony space that blended traditional elements with modern touches, young Seo Jun chatted with Kim Haewon about how their families had been transformed by the events of recent months. Sometimes, Haewon reflected, we need our children to teach us how to see the world from a new perspective. The ceremony began at sunset, when the traditional lanterns were lit, creating a magical atmosphere under the soft snow. Guests from different social and business spheres mingled naturally, symbolizing the change that Dami and Taejun had initiated in the Korean corporate world. Shin Yuna, covering the event for a special on transformations in Asian business, watched as executives from Taekyung Solutions chatted animatedly with delivery men from the old network that Taejun had used in his disguise. The most touching moment came during the exchange of votes, when Taejun surprised everyone by briefly wearing his delivery boy uniform over his hanbok. "This is how our story began," he said, his voice heavy with emotion, "with a lie that turned into the greatest truth of my life." Dami, overcome with emotion, replied by pulling an old postcard from Busan out of her sleeve, the same one she had discovered weeks before. "And it ends with all the pieces of fate fitting together perfectly." During the reception, held in a space that mixed modern elements with traditional Bukshin architecture, Min Seo and Juno announced their own engagement, sparking a new wave of celebrations. Park Dong-go, observing the united families, commented to his son, "See, Miho? Sometimes we lose a battle to win something much bigger." Taekyung Solutions' new technology was officially launched during the party, with guests from different walks of life demonstrating how the platform was revolutionizing the way people connected and did business. It's like our personal story has turned into something that can help other people break down barriers, Demi commented to Taejun as they danced under the colored lanterns. Young Hyerin, completely recovered from her previous condition, smiled as she saw her daughter not only happy, but truly fulfilled. Sometimes we need to let our children choose their own paths to find their true strength. At midnight, when the snow had covered Seoul in a blanket of white, Demi and Taejun escaped to the small apartment where it had all begun. The space, now transformed into a memorial to their journey, held the delivery boy's uniform framed on the wall, along with the postcard from Busan and the first impromptu marriage proposal. "Do you know what's most amazing?" said Taejun, hugging Demi as they watched the city from the window. "Every lie we've told has brought us closer to the truth we were looking for, and every mask we've worn has helped us show our true faces," she added. The next morning, Seoul's newspapers carried not only the wedding photos, but also stories about how Demi and Taejun's union had inspired a new era in Korean business, where social and corporate barriers were beginning to dissolve. The small cafe where they had shared so many important moments now displayed a discreet sign, where a delivery changed more than lunch. It had become a popular meeting place for young entrepreneurs who dreamed of making a difference in the corporate world. The snow continued to fall over Seoul, but inside the apartment where a CEO had disguised himself as a delivery man and an heiress had found the courage to follow her heart, the warmth of a true story warmed not just two hearts, but inspired an entire generation to seek authenticity in a world of appearances. And so, on a winter's morning in Seoul, a story that began with an impulsive marriage proposal became a legacy of change, proving that sometimes we need to lose ourselves completely to find exactly where we should be.